Hello everyone, welcome to Brighton Digital Festival and our fifth in the series of BDF sessions. For those who don't know, I'm Ali. I'm the Artistic Director and CEO of Lighthouse, which is an arts charity based in Brighton in the UK. Lighthouse was one of the organisations that set up Brighton Digital Festival together with Wired Sussex and Clear Left. And this year we're celebrating the 10th anniversary. And it's a real honour to be directing the BDF programme, which has over 50 activities taking place in the city and beyond. The festival has grown and adapted and adjusted according to needs and specialisms, but it's always remained a community-driven platform that supports and encourages people across the city to experience and explore digital culture. We're halfway through the festival and there's been many meetups, workshops, installations, gaming sessions, prototyping, all through a range of digital spaces. And today we're delighted to be here talking about the rise and future of NFTs. When we were programming earlier on in the year, we knew that we had to do something around this and crypto, but had no idea where that world would be by the time we got to November. And it's safe to say that quite a lot happens in a nanosecond. We had to program this in. We're a digital festival, but we're a community-focused one, and NFTs seems to really use this idea of community in the greatest and darkest of ways. So we're joined today by some of the best people with differing experiences. So I can't wait for this. First up, we have Shardcore, who is a Brighton-based artist and curator who makes work in a range of media, from painting, digital installation, machine learning, AI, art, and key themes are identity, consciousness, big data, and the relationship between humans and machines. Dev Moore is a net artist, curator, technologist, creative technologist, and member of the Felt Collective. Dev's work incorporates technology, music culture, and all the while referencing components of tech culture. Rebecca Assay is a crypto and blockchain writer with an interest in emerging technologies and financial psychology. And this will be chaired by Hetty Judah, who is the chief art critic of The Eye and regular contributor to Freeze, the New York Times, and The Guardian. Just wanted to say a special thanks really quickly to our sponsors and supporters of BDF, because without their support, it wouldn't have happened. Brandwatch, MPB, Uplift, Oban International, Brilliant Noise, and PlusX Brighton. Thanks to Lighthouse crew, and David is in the background here to support anybody with any tech questions on this Zoom. Hetty's going to run through the format, but just to say at the bottom, there's chat for tech issues and the Q&A at the bottom. So please use that if you want to put any questions forward to our panel, and say who it's for when you put it down there. So enjoy this. Thanks so much to everybody on the panel for joining us. It's a real treat. Over and out from me.
Thank you so much, Ali. I think we're actually going to start off with a presentation from Eric, who is going to take us through the basics of NFTs and explain this this extraordinary phenomenon. And so I think that introduction is going to last for about 10 minutes, I think, Eric, am I right?
Yeah, about that.
And then we're going to have, I think, about 35 to 40 minutes of chat with our panel. And then we're going to open it up for a Q&A, because I'm sure lots of people watching and listening are going to have all kinds of burning questions they want to put to our expert panel. I think let's start off with Eric's presentation. And Dev and Rebecca, let's all turn our video off and mute ourselves, and we'll return at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much, Eric.
Oh, well, hello, good evening. I'm going to give you a somewhat biased and purely subjective crash course into NFTs as an artist who has been playing with them for quite a long time. Yeah, I'm going to very quickly explain what they are, and we can move on. So let's start. An NFT stands for non-fungible token. And this little quadrangle explains it quite nicely. So you can see on the bottom right, the car and the painting and the house, that's a tangible, real thing, but it's also non-fungible. Like if I have a copy of the Mona Lisa and I chop it in half, I don't have two multi-million pound paintings. I have a worthless thing. Whereas if you look at the gold and the money, you can chop that up. So if I've got a £50 note, I can turn it into 5 £10 notes, and it still has the same value. So a intangible fungible would be an example of something like Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency, where you can do money-like things and you can divide it up and split it out and share it and use it. But it is in and of itself can be broken down. So that leaves us to the bottom left there, which is a non-fungible token. So what that basically means is a thing that is unique and cannot be broken down, but it's intangible in this case. So it's not like a house or a car. It tends to be a digital file, and that's what NFTs are. So a little background. NFTs in some ways solve one of the problems with digital art, which is if I create an artwork in a digital form, it is inherently infinitely reproducible. You can look back to the days of Napster when people realized that they could upload MP3s and share them amongst each other for free. That fundamentally upset the music industry, because you've taken what was previously a tangible physical object from like a CD and turned it into a digital asset that can be copied and shared. And artistically, this points to the ideas of Walter Benjamin, which is as soon as photography occurred, that kind of set the cat amongst the pigeons for artists, because you end up with a multiple reproducible image. And that's fundamentally different from the traditional kind of auratic power of a singular physical object like a painting. And for digital art, it's even worse, right? Because we put this stuff on the internet and anyone can get at it. And there's not any real way to say that this particular work is mine. And that's where NFTs step in. So you'll have undoubtedly heard stories about lots and lots of money sloshing around. The Beeple sale was probably the most notable publicly, which was a collection of 3D renders by Beeple in a big bundle that he sold as an NFT, and then Christie's got in on it as well and sold it again, and a lot of money moved around. One of the aspects of NFTs is that I would argue the artistic aspect of it is somewhat secondary to the cultural ramifications of NFT. So here we can see Nyan Cat, the classic GIF, was sold by its creator for 300 Ether, which is a cryptocurrency, which at the time translated to about $600,000. That may seem absurd to you, but that's the nature of NFTs. So at their core, the idea of an NFT is a record on the blockchain. And I'm sure some of you have heard of the blockchain and blockchain currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum. In simple terms, a blockchain is a decentralized ledger. It's a big book of records where everyone writes everything down and everyone can look at the same book and nothing is ever deleted. So if you compare it to something like a traditional database, if you imagine Facebook, everything you post on Facebook is a record and it lives at Facebook, and Facebook decide who gets to see it and what happens to it. Whereas with a blockchain, you mark something in the blockchain and everyone in the world can look at it. And so this allows us as artists to put a record in the ledger to say, I created an artwork today, and I'm going to mark it, and it's mine, it exists now. And a non-fungible token is effectively a link to that record. So here's an example of a NFT for a series I created last November. And it effectively manifests as a rendition of the digital file on screen with some supporting text like you would in a gallery. And it can be traded. So you probably can't see it very clearly in the bottom corner there, but there's a history of the activity of this NFT. So at the bottom, you can see I minted it. I created it on this one. Yeah, this one was in March. So I minted it in March and I swapped it out and offered it for sale. And my friend Mario immediately bought it for 1 TES. This is probably my first NFT sale on Tezos. From an artistic perspective, there is some fascinatingly great art out on the NFT scene. And I think much of the discussion and public discussion is around the kind of absurdity of crypto apes or pixel punks, or kind of this, what is not traditional artwork, changing hands for lots of money. But there is some good stuff out there, and I think we should not lose sight that there is art in the NFT space, despite what the press may say. So when I buy an NFT, what am I actually buying? I'm buying a till receipt. I'm buying a record on this blockchain that says Eric Drass currently owns this picture. And that record cannot be changed. So at this point in time, Eric Drass is recorded as owning it. But I don't actually own the asset per se, the picture or the video or whatever it is. That's not inherently part of the blockchain. What's in the blockchain is a pointer to a place on the internet where it lives. So all it's saying is this is a record of ownership. In and of itself, it's not a physical object. It's not like getting a painting and hanging it on your wall. It's more like getting a till receipt for a painting. And obviously the issue with digital art is that you can save it, right? So why would I pay $20,000 for an image that I can just download from the internet? That cuts to the very core of the NFT, because what you're saying is, by owning this thing, I am the owner and I therefore imbue value into this system. And that's something that's been lacking quite a lot in digital art, because generally people post it for free and there's not many opportunities to sell, but NFTs stepped in. So if we look at this little history, this is a history of that Quasimodo piece that we just showed. If you start from the bottom to the top, you can see that he created 3 of them, 3 editions. And what's interesting from an artist's point of view is that when you create or mint your NFT, you can assign what's known as a smart contract to it. And in this case, the contract is that whenever this NFT sells, the originator, in this case Mario, gets 15% of that sale forever. So you can see, if you work from the bottom to the top, that he originally listed it at 75, and then subsequently it sold for more and more money. And at the top, the last transaction there sold for 250. Each of those transactions, Mario, as the artist, gets a 15% kickback. So not only do you have this chain of provenance, so you can see who originated this work, whose hands it has been through, but the artists themselves, is baked into the system, is a kickback for the artist, which is quite different from the traditional art world, where you sell your painting for £500 and then after you die, someone makes 50 million out of it. The artist doesn't really get kickback on that. So what we're doing here is basically creating artificial rarity. We're taking a digital file that is inherently reproducible, and saying, now I'm going to make it rare. I'm going to say there are only 1 of these, or only an edition of 10 of them. As I say, it's artificial. It's not like the Superman comic, right? There's only so many of those that physically survive, and that's dictated by people losing them and spilling water on them. An NFT is just a record of that idea of rarity. So when I first started minting NFTs, I was using the Ethereum blockchain. It's worth noting here that there are different places where you can mint your NFT. There's not one blockchain. There are multiple blockchains. We'll probably touch on that later. Ethereum is probably the biggest and has the greatest coverage and value in terms of NFT records. But it has this downside that it's a system that uses a lot of energy in its production. And Memo, Atken, and others, artists, looked into this to find out quite what the ramifications are. And it turns out that by minting an NFT, by putting it on the blockchain, has an enormous carbon footprint. The example here is that minting an NFT is the equivalent to flying for 1,500 hours, or boiling a kettle 3.5 million times just to list your artwork. And morally, that feels bad. I don't want to be in a system that's burning that much energy just so I can be part of the market. And then luckily, there are alternatives, what are known as clean NFTs, that don't use the same horrific amounts of energy. You don't have to burn a rainforest every time you make an artwork. As a comparison, the blockchain that I use personally, Tezos, to mint a picture as an NFT on the Tezos chain is the equivalent to flicking the kettle on and off for 1 second. So that's significantly different than the thousands of hours that Ethereum burns. So I think for me personally, morally, that's quite an important issue, is that if we're going to play this game, let's not destroy the planet while we're doing it. So as I mentioned, my first NFTs were a series of cryptid currencies, which are generative pieces created from a neural network that I trained on 50,000 banknotes, and is a kind of slight dig at the crypto scene. I also minted some other generative work. This is a neural network that I trained on Francis Bacon paintings. So none of these actual Francis Bacon paintings exist. They were dreamt up by my network. And more recently, a series of generative works based around the image sequences of Edward Muybridge from the 1890s. Practically speaking, as an artist, one of the issues about the NFT scene is you've got to sell them, right? Listing it, just simply minting an NFT doesn't mean anyone's going to buy it. You have to go out and sell it, which means you have to engage with the buyers. And personally, and I think I speak for a number of artists, that whoring out your own work is one of the most painful things to do in the world, particularly because NFTs were getting a big kickback of heat about their eco footprint. So to put your hand up and saying, hey, I've made an NFT, come and buy it. And 80% of your followers go, I hate you, you're burning the planet. So finding a market and hustling your work is inherently part of running an NFT. Underneath that is the market is cruel, right? This is a chart of NFT sales for a couple of months, and you can see that it's quite up and down, so you don't even know if there's any buyers out there. And because you're using a cryptocurrency to trade these things, the value of the actual currency goes up and down. So that NFT that you sold for $1,000 today could be worth $500 tomorrow. So you'd have like $500 in your account, or you could have 2,000. I don't know. There's a huge volatility in crypto, so it's quite divorced from normal currency. So what's really happening is that artworks are being used as assets, right? So kind of asset class artwork is the paintings and sculptures you hear that sell for millions and millions of dollars. People aren't really hanging those on their wall. They're putting them in a free port and then hanging onto them and selling them again at Christie's a few years later and moving it to another free port. There's the actual artistic value of the work is not the thing. And NFTs are fascinating because it brings that to the surface for every artist, is that much as you want to think people are buying your art because they love it, currently a lot of the market is about people buying stuff so they can sell it again quickly and make some money. And so they just use it as an asset. And that results in some very strange things being posted. And there's a whole different culture based on the kind of things that NFTs sell. And they're slightly different from the fine art world. So very quickly, the gist of it is that it's creating this artificial rarity. And historically, the most valuable artists are the dead ones, right? And that's how it works. To be a good artist, to make money, you have to make some work, sell it for nothing, and then die. And if we look at something like the Salvador Mundi, which sold for $450 million, the art critics and art historians aren't even sure that it's a Da Vinci. But the market has dictated that this object is a Da Vinci and has an incredible value to it, even though no one really knows whether Da Vinci painted it or not. Now, if Da Vinci had minted it on the blockchain, there would be a complete record of every single person who had that painting, dating all the way back to Da Vinci painting in the first place. And obviously for valuation of whether something is a fake or not, that's incredibly valuable. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of the kind of conceptual ideas of NFTs are quite interesting for fine art once we get over the hype about all the money. And the gist of it is, again, I'm probably speaking personally, I find artists tend to have quite an uncomfortable relationship with money. They'd like to have some, and they don't quite know how to get it. And usually there are gatekeepers who decide whether your art is worth money or not. Playing that game is a whole thing. And NFTs have liberated us in some ways. So it's about the work that I can create myself can be put on the market directly. And I have to deal with, the capitalistic ramifications of that. But I'm going to leave on the note of my good friend Zen Bullets, who says, if it makes money, it's not art. And I'm going to leave it there. So I think that's that's my launch off point. If it makes money, it's not art. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really fascinating, and that's been a very thought-provoking introduction to today's discussion. Ali, can everybody see Dev, Rebecca, myself? Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much again, Eric. And Rebecca and Dev, if you could turn your microphones on, that's fantastic. Well, we've had a great introduction to Eric's work and to his own relationship with the kind of crypto economy and to the world of NFTs. And before we start on the discussion, I'd just like to get a little bit more background on Rebecca and Dev so that we get more of a sense of what their relationship is to this world. Dev, could you start off by just explaining a little bit what your, just in a couple of sentences, what your relationship is to this whole world?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. So I'm a creative director at a creative studio called Zine. We're also an internet art platform and collective. We started in about 2011 or 12 during a particular era in time where digital art wasn't necessarily invited or accepted within a lot of institutions, galleries, wasn't necessarily as popular as it is today. So, we essentially created an ecosystem and a digital ecosystem where artists can feel respected, honored, and also documented. So, every week we would essentially create a zine, and we use that as like a metaphor for how we particularly, work. And, we essentially created a weekly experience for people to experience a new type of artist every week. So we're exploring different types of digital software, artists that are using, different strategies and skill sets to create essentially work that exists on the internet. And it's by a digital artist. So, we kind of go with the mantra, internet art and digital art is internet for the internet, by the internet. So yeah, we essentially have been doing that for a couple of years. And we've shifted to eventually NFTs because we pretty much realized that it's a great tool to continue documenting the type of work that we do and for the work that we create as well. It's just a strong way that we can further tie ourselves to our community, and our community has a stronger relationship to the artists that they respect and the communities that they're interacting with. So. Yeah, just in regards to NFTs, we kind of arrived to it from a digital art perspective and, from a perspective where we also understood that, not everyone can be accepted within the institutions that people look up to. So sometimes you have to really, create your own. And, at least with NFTs and that technology, it allows essentially, in my opinion, a lot of communities the opportunity to finally have ownership and creator autonomy over their work and their career too. So, we've seen a lot of artists being able to finally value their own work and also have stronger relationships to their own supporters as well, without intermediaries or middlemen.
Yeah, thank you so much. There are so many interesting things that came up in that. I think particularly this emphasis on community and it being and lack of gatekeepers, and this idea that you're kind of trying to work against this idea of art as a kind of elite system as well. So there's lots I really want to come back to, and that you were just talking about. Rebecca, you've got quite a different relationship to the crypto economy, and you've been involved in some quite interesting things in the last couple of years. I'd really love you just to chat briefly through what your own connection is to all of this.
My connection towards NFT will be from the educational point of view. But before NFT, I've been in the crypto space for a while, creating crypto content based on education and educating people, and then working with some cryptocurrency platforms. Currently, I'm working with Bitmama. It's a crypto exchange and all that, and we are trying to bridge the gap between the government and the people and create a space where people can trade cryptocurrencies without the interference of the government and middlemen institutions like the bank. And I'm also a board member of Black Women in Blockchain Council. Black Women in Blockchain Council is an organization that tries to bring education to the Black community and women in diaspora, to teach them about blockchain and STEM, and also bring them to understand what the blockchain ecosystem can do for this particular group. I'm also involved with a lot of NFT projects back here in my home country, teaching people about NFTs, because we don't want to get left behind, and we don't also want people getting left behind, in this current evolving technology. So basically that is what I do: educate, educate, educate.
That's, yeah, again, there's so many interesting things that I want to come back to in that, particularly this idea of, who's selling, who's buying, who's getting left behind, and kind of bringing people into the sphere. I'd like to kind of stay with you for a moment, Rebecca, because one of the areas you're particularly interested in is the kind of psychology of investment and wealth and profit. And well, actually, that's another question I'm going to return to, but I think it would be really interesting, just first of all, to talk about the state of the crypto economy at the moment, because it seems to have grown hugely over the last year. Could you just give us just a little kind of overview of the state of the crypto economy right now and the changes that have taken place recently?
The crypto economy, from a non-crypto point of view, it's going to look more like a whale trying to swallow, a group of fishes in the water. So it's huge. It's very huge. So we are going to look at it from the point of view of a tree. When you plant a tree, and then the tree has to grow from a seedling down to a mighty tree. So currently, the crypto space is still growing. It hasn't gotten to its full potential yet, because there are so many use cases of the blockchain and the crypto industry that has not been fully utilized. But currently, we are seeing a growth where the Bitcoin itself alone has hit $1 trillion as its market cap. So it has hit $1 trillion, I think, mid this year. And that is just for Bitcoin. We are not talking about the other currencies in the crypto industry. So lots of people are pumping in their money into the crypto space. It's a growing ecosystem of financial possibilities. So basically how the crypto industry is that it started with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the first cryptocurrency. It started with Bitcoin, and then it moved to other cryptocurrencies, and then it moved to DeFi, which is decentralized finance, which has to do with everything that has to do with finance, loaning, borrowing, staking, and lending, and everything, insurance also. That's for the decentralized finance. And now we are talking about NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So the crypto space is currently evolving. It's a huge ecosystem, and it's currently always, growing. So currently that's where we are with the crypto space. It's evolving. Now, cryptocurrency is still there, because when you talk of NFTs, you need cryptocurrencies to buy your NFTs. You can't buy or sell your NFTs without cryptocurrencies. So, it's like a use case and evolving into a different use case and evolving into another different use case. So that is how the crypto industry is currently. Now, we're not talking about the other coins that are pumping up, and then the prices of these coins are, soaring, and people are making incredible gains out of these coins. But we're talking about the use cases of cryptocurrencies And cryptocurrency, like I'll always say, is a use case of the blockchain. And NFTs are also use cases of the blockchain. So they are all tied together.
Yeah, because it seems that this period during which we've all suddenly become aware of the term NFTs, and then suddenly there's been a lot of headlines about NFTs being sold for huge amounts of money, and the fact there's a lot of the market also seems to coincide with a period in which the crypto economy's grown hugely, and that there are a lot of, it seems that there are suddenly a lot more people involved in the crypto economy as well. So I guess more potential buyers and sellers of NFTs.
Yes, yes. So if I'm going to give an in-depth look at how the crypto industry has grown, I would say, okay, Q3 of 2021, that's the last quarter, we had about 41,257,000 wallets, active wallets trading NFTs. That's like a growth from just 20,000 the previous quarter. So like first quarter of 2021, we had about 20,000 wallets trading NFTs. Now, at the third quarter of 2021, we have over 412,578. So I think that will get it into more perspective. And this figure was gotten from non-fungible.com. So non-fungible.com is a platform where you can get, details about NFTs and, bots and whatnot. Now, from 20,000 wallets, active wallets trading NFTs, we have over 400,000 wallets trading NFTs. That's to show you the magnitude of the growth. It's an insane growth. So more people are coming into the space, more people are trading, NFTs, more people are moving from crypto down to NFTs. So it's a huge market.
Yeah, no, it seems to have grown hugely. One thing that I'm quite interested in is where the NFT markets come from, because I feel that it came out of some things that are particular to the digital world. And Dev, I'd really like if you could just chat us through this a little bit, because I mean, one thing that occurred to me is that it perhaps came out of, for example, in-game purchases or something like that, that people were getting used to buying things in the digital space. Does that make sense, or am I just talking ignorantly?
Yeah, could you?
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is for Dev. I was just going to ask Dev. We'll come back to you in a minute, Rebecca, if that's okay.
All right, no problem.
So sorry, my bad. Was your question essentially like, how did people start?
Where did this come from? Yeah.
Oh yeah. At least in my opinion, it started on essentially Ethereum being, the first particular blockchain where people were really utilizing smart contracts. So being able to, create a program that can accept, a form of currency, and, it has functions that can, agree or disagree with, a particular idea. So basically like creating apps and putting them on a blockchain. There was a particular project called CryptoPunks. You might have seen them in the news. They're just 10,000 unique pixel avatar profile pictures. So people started essentially collecting those. It was a group called Larva Labs where they created 10,000 of them, and they all have traits. So some have green hair, some have blue hair, some have, a cigarette hanging out of their mouths. And some of them are even like zombies, and they're very playful and fun to people. So people essentially collected all 10,000 of them, and they were deemed one of the first NFT projects because each one was unique and you could own it in your wallet. So from there, essentially, that particularly created a framework for how people started to release their projects. So, after that particular project, and I think it might have been 2017 or 18 perhaps, people really started to use that same concept of, oh, I can create a collection and I can create rarity within the collection by, creating different traits within the collection. And then from there, people track that with the actual metadata. So if a photo has red hair, you can actually present that particular property in the actual NFT. So someone might collect it and they know, not just beyond, you know, looking at it, but they can also know in the metadata, like, oh, this is one of the only pictures that, you know, has red hair in this collection. And yeah, people continue to this day, people continue to essentially have that same sort of mindset when they're collecting artwork. It's kind of like antique roadshow mixed with digital art in a way. I explain it to that. I explained it that way to my grandmother, and she gets it really fast.
It's very much something that came out of the crypto trading world. It's not something that came out of like online gaming. It's not something that came out of you know, people already having a taste for digital art. So it really started off as a financial transaction.
Well, yeah, may I just butt in for a second? I think historically, like as Dev alludes to, the foundations of the NFT came with the more complicated blockchain. So it came with Ethereum, where you can do smart contracting and you can start playing these games, right? You can start, it's not just about moving money around. You can put a contract into it, so that contract can say, well, when this thing moves or this thing points to something else. So an NFT is a pointer. There's a little contract that says, okay, this little token points at something else. And when if a transaction occurs, there's a contract that says the artist gets paid back. And I think probably Ria Myers wrote about this in 2014 when she was working on Ethereum, conceptually from an artistic perspective, about the idea that art could exist on the blockchain. And it was kind of widely ignored because who the hell gave a shit about art on the blockchain in 2014? But I think the technical capability has been around for quite a while. I'd love to know who the first person who managed to turn it into a market is. And I think that's a slightly more sinister question. So we'll leave that one till later.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, you know, the early projects like CryptoKitties, CryptoPunks essentially were able to create that first, not mainstream, but mainstream within the Ethereum ecosystem, kind of mainstream projects that people saw as like the perfect example of what it would look like if art, or at least a lot of people consider CryptoPunks collectibles, but collectibles are art to be, you know, seen on the blockchain. So, but yeah.
Well, I guess one of the reasons I was interested as to whether it kind of came through kind of gamified social spaces is because there is this competitive element that seems to be very intrinsic to it, and also to do with a kind of a form of public display. Rebecca, do you have some kind of theories or some research about who it is that's buying NFTs? Who are the kind of people that are the collectors?
Okay, from my experience, I would say there are two types of buyers of NFTs. So I would consider NFTs to be a thing of social status. It has to do with, you know, I'll consider NFT to be like a Birkin bag. You know, a Birkin bag signifies, you know, its social status, because of course you have to have a lot of money to own a Birkin bag. I can't just go into any store to get a Birkin bag currently. And so NFTs are social symbols. And since they're social symbols, everyone wants to own an NFT to, you know, feel, you know, as part of that social strata. Gary V currently has over, it's not 500. He has a lot of NFTs. I can't categorically remember the numbers right now, but Gary V has a lot of NFTs. Snoop Dogg has, you know, a reasonable amount of NFTs. Now, if these people at the top are getting into NFTs, everyone feels there must be something important, so I have to get it. Why do you think there are, you know, fake versions of a Rolex? Because people consider the Rolex watch to have value. So if the Rolex has value, and, you know, the 1% of the 1% in the world can wear Rolexes, I think you know, the other people at the bottom of the chain feel, okay, if I can get a fake Rolex watch, I can feel good about myself and feel like, well, it's not the real thing, but, you know, it's still a Rolex, or the thought of a Rolex. So currently NFTs are more like, social symbols. So people are buying into it. And then since a lot of people can't get, NFTs like CryptoPunks and, some crypto kittens are incredibly expensive currently. So a lot of people are minting NFTs. So NFTs are being minted at the speed of lightning, and people are just buying into it. Now, to show you just how much of a social symbol NFTs are, someone mints an NFT with less than $20 to $80, less within that range, $20 to $100, and then lists that NFT up for sale for 10 Ethereum. Now, one Ethereum costs a little over $4,000 currently. Now you are listing at that NFT for 10 Ethereum. So technically, who do you want to buy that NFT if not someone who is also equally wealthy? So I feel, now I just have to be clear that this is what I feel, that NFTs are more of a social symbols. So, lots of people are buying NFTs as a way of buying into social symbols. Now, we have to be clear that NFTs are not just about art alone. NFTs are for all expressions of art. Now, most of the time when we talk about art, people think it's just, the paintings and then the pictures, but NFTs are a wide expression. NFTs can represent jewelries and, pieces of real estate like shares of the building and all that. Those could also be represented by NFTs. Well, a lot of people aren't thinking of that expression of NFTs. Everyone wants to think of NFTs as art. It's like, if I ask you, would you want the original painting of the Mona Lisa? Everyone will want to get their hands on it. So currently, that is what NFTs represent. So NFTs are more of social symbols, and everyone wants to get involved in it. Now, people don't care if they understand what it is or what it isn't about, but if the 1% of the 1% are getting into NFTs, then it must be something very important and no one wants to be left behind. Now, who exactly are getting into NFTs? I'll say everybody. Everyone who is aware of NFT is trying to get into it. Now, a lot of artists are drawing and are creating their art and minting it up on the blockchain and having people buy it. But then you have to be on certain blockchains to have your NFTs get sold for huge amounts. So now that also borders down to community. What kind of community are you in? What kind of blockchain have you minted your NFT on? What kind of project have you minted your NFT on? So those are the other factors that will determine how high or how low you can sell your NFTs. Now, NFTs are not just left to certain groups. Every group is trying to get represented on, by creating NFT. Black groups are also, getting represented quite well. Africans themselves, we are also trying to get represented. There's this NFT I got the other day, Nigerian granny rather. So it's an NFT, a drawing of a Nigerian granny, although it doesn't really represent the typical Nigerian granny, but that's what they called it. So, I got it. So these are what NFTs are about. So it's more of a social symbol than it is about. It's not just the art, it's the social symbol. It's like, getting a piece of the, the Mona Lisa, the original drawing of the Mona Lisa. So I think that is what NFTs are about.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually going to come to you, Eric, because I see you waving at me. Because obviously NFTs, that there are all kinds of different NFTs. There are collectibles as well, but there was actually I specifically wanted to ask you about a term that came up in your presentation, which is generative, because this seems to me as quite an important part of kind of the NFT world. But did you want to chat a little bit about who you
I think it was more, yeah, I think just back to your question of who is trading these things. I think you have to think of it in terms of, I hate to use the term metaverse, but there's a thing going on where people are spending more and more of their time online than they are offline, and investing more into online behavior, and particularly crypto. There's a kind of libertarian thread of like, I'm outside the state. Look at me playing this game with my, magic tokens that the government can't touch me. There's that kind of whole thing going on. And inside that space, I totally agree with Rebecca that it's social signaling, which is why avatars of punks and apes do really well, because you can buy that thing, change your Twitter profile or your Discord profile, and publicly show to everyone that you've just spent a lot of money on a thing that they can't have. And so the kind of people who are dropping big money on NFTs don't give a crap about Ferraris or big houses or swimming pools, because they only care about the stuff that's happening online, and the community of signaling is an entirely online space. And I think as a more traditional artist, it's quite difficult to get your head around that. If you're used to looking at pictures in a gallery and trading in physical objects in the physical world, we tend to not think about these people who are always online, who are deep into the kind of the crypto culture, are not necessarily the same as your man on the street.
Yeah, because there's also a market of, I guess, what you call collectibles rather than what you necessarily
exactly.
just like trading cards. So
yeah, so it's very sorry. I think my personal tension with it is it's pitched as art, but quite a lot of it isn't art. And I think Rebecca and Deb both touched on that, which is people like collecting stuff.
Yeah.
And this introduction of artificial rarity into stuff that happens online is exactly the same as a Superman comic, right? Suddenly you can do that exciting thing of I own Superman with digital assets. And that's very appealing to a certain kind of mindset.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also interesting because there seem to be also real world brand collaborations now coming into the collectibles market. So I think Dolce & Gabbana did a $6 million fashion NFT sale.
I saw yesterday that Quentin Tarantino is releasing 7 unreleased scenes from Pulp Fiction as NFTs.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting on it.
Yeah. So if we've got some idea now of who's buying the work, who is it that's selling the work? Are these artists who are previously working in the digital sphere? Are these chancers? Is everybody now trying to sell NFTs? Because I guess there are 2 separate questions: who's selling and who's selling successfully. Dev, do you have any insights into this that you could share?
Yeah, definitely. At least in the 2020 era, where a lot of the NFT marketplaces started to take off, the particular type of artist that was essentially becoming successful were digital artists that didn't really have a space where they could actually, essentially upload a digital artwork and, someone can actually collect it. So just that mechanism being created sort of allowed digital artists to be the first people to sort of, be these type of people that can use NFTs efficiently. But, there is a certain I guess you would say like subculture of artists that sort of have, coding experience or programming experience where they can combine both worlds. So kind of creating what they call like generative art. So not only, the art being poetic, but also, the way that they're actually creating their smart contracts to release the work is also poetic as well. And also how the artwork is generated as well is poetic in some instances as well.
Could you explain this term generative art for people? Because I think this is really important, and it's a big part of this whole thing about rarity and speculation and turning things up that are unexpected as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone wants to like interject it after I say it too, if they have like a better explanation, feel free to. But yeah, essentially, I think a good example is, at least with Feltzine, a very simple idea, I guess you would say, of like generative art would be if I had a profile picture and, it was a picture of, someone wearing a mask or something. And then, on the back end, every time a work is created, let's say someone wants to get my work, they'll go to essentially our page, they'll claim our website to retrieve an artwork, and then they'll have a randomized artwork presented to them. So it might be a red, mask, it might be a yellow mask, it might be, a green hat, but all of these things are randomized and controlled either by an algorithm or a program or whatever the actual artist decides. So generative art is essentially, like a collection of work that you you don't necessarily know exactly how the artwork will present itself once it's created. So people will rush to a website to get a generative artwork, and they know the certain parameters that are possible. Like, okay, they're going to be wearing a mask, but I don't know what color, or the background is going to be some type of, green, yellow, or blue. But yeah, people start to essentially collect these works, and then once all of them have been created, let's say the collection is going to be 500 max that can be created, then from there people start to see which ones are aesthetically the most popular or the most interesting, which ones are saying things that not even the creator knew would be possible. Maybe there's a particular piece that has a combination that really speaks to people. So at least for us, we have this one project called Villains, and that's why I was using the mask metaphor essentially. But if you click into the link, you can basically see like a pretty easy example where there were essentially 1,000 pieces available in the collection, and a couple of hundred people collected the works, and then after that, people were able to see what other ones were created. So some people have particular artworks that have green hoodies. Some people have an artwork with a Haitian flag. But all in all, it's just a very interesting way to express yourself as an artist through this particular medium, the generative art form. And that's essentially why, I think people like to engage with it. And then of course, for people that are speculating or collecting and trying to get the work, it also presents them a particular space to really speculate which ones are the most distinguished within a collection. So it's like a mix of, it's almost like, the streetwear brands like Supreme or Palace and whatnot. It's almost like the same logic. You can create this, a collection of t-shirts and you have a limited amount, but then from there, people that might not even be fans of Supreme or Palace or whatever, might try to jump in to get it because they know that they have a core base of people and a community that respects and values what they create. So it's just a lot of different avenues that are introduced in this new NFT art space.
Yeah, I mean, I think one really interesting thing that came out of what you were saying is this idea that it's almost like a kind of form of branding that people are buying into an artist or a collective or an identity that they want to be associated and they want a part of. And this whole thing of generative works is you're not sure what you're going to get necessarily. You're investing in it, and then something will be generated. Eric, I saw that you had an opinion that you wanted to share about who's selling and who's selling successfully.
Well, no, only briefly that generative art has been around for a very long time and is not solely this particular expression in NFT space. I think the kind of projects that Dev is talking about, they're using generative principles, but what they're doing is introducing variation in the artwork, so you get different looking villains. And what I'm seeing more and more is that there's a distribution of attributes programmed into the system. So the one with the red hat, there's only one of that guy, but there's 10 people with a blue hat and there's 50 people with a green hat. And so there's features within the artworks that indicate their rarity that then give them different value within the system. So it's kind of interesting. And once again, it gets tied into this sort of commercial thing. The rarest one is the most valuable, but I can still get on the game because I can buy one of the 500. But one of them is definitely going to be the best one, right? And whether that's due to rarity or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I've got you there. Yeah. Okay. I'm just aware that we've got we're running out of time. I think we're so I just want to keep moving a little bit
absolutely
forward because there are so many very large questions that I'm desperate to ask you. But actually, Eric, while I have you there, I want to bring up this question of the environmental factor because obviously you've received some heat about this.
And so I moved out of Ethereum. So all of the projects that and all of the big money is happening in Ethereum, and I couldn't with good conscience play that game, right? And if I wanted to make big money, I should go in there and build a generative ape thing and make $1 million and leave, but I can't. It doesn't feel right to me. So I think I'm much more interested in the way for a market for actually proper horrible thing to say, but I mean, proper fine artwork, which has been happening in digital art for years and years and years, but has not had a marketplace. So I guess I'm far more at the art end of it than the collectibles end of it. And I couldn't conscience burning rainforest when I do it. And every time one of those apes changes hands, it's burning shit tons of fuel, and like, really.
I will interject and say though that even with like Ethereum in particular, it's not even like 10 or even like 5% of transactions on the actual network, like the way that essentially
sure, there's sidechain stuff, but I mean, there are ways around it.
Well, no, not sidechain stuff, but it's a limited block space that's going to be used, regardless. So, even though like Ethereum exists, like even if NFTs weren't minted at all one day, it would still be the same amount of energy used just in regards to Ethereum.
Sure, but that's Ethereum existing. That's not necessarily about participating in the system as an artist. Right? I mean, I agree, Ethereum ain't going anywhere. So
yeah,
you can look at it that way, but it's the transactional cost, the ecological transactional cost troubled me personally, which is why I got out of it. But
I guess one of the things that, sorry, yes, Rebecca.
I'm sorry. I'm not coming from the environmental point of view, but from what Eric said about his principles about not minting on the Ethereum blockchain. That's another aspect that artists have to think about. Now, what are my principles as an artist? And if I'm minting on this blockchain, what does the blockchain represent? Should I mint on this blockchain? How much would my artwork cost? Who do I want to get my artwork? So these are questions that artists want to ask themselves first before getting into the NFT place. What are my principles? Do I want to sell my artwork just to anybody, or do I want to sell to a particular set of people? What do I want to use the proceeds for? How much do I want my artwork to be valued for? So these are principles beyond just the environmental effects that the blockchain has, the mining and all that, to the environment. What about the conscience, the artist's conscience, or how the artist wants his art to be expressed? So these are questions that I think, every artist will want to ask before, jumping into the NFT scene.
So how can an artist that wants to get involved potentially in the NFT scene control those factors? For example, if you wanted to create an NFT that was available to a certain audience, or that was representing, let's say that's representing Black women or African creativity or something, what are the kinds of, or that was actually sending money specifically at each time of the sale back to a certain group of people, what are the kind of choices that you could make?
I'll jump in. I'm so sorry.
I just wanted to ask Rebecca that, if that's okay, just quickly.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right. We have different NFT collections. There's this particular collection I wrote about a while ago about women. I can't remember the name currently, but they are a group of NFT collections that create NFTs just for women. And it's I think women rights, and it's built on the Solana blockchain. That's the name of the NFT, women rights. So this NFT collection is created just to support women rights. So there are lots of NFT projects online that would support the artist expression. There are Black NFT collections. The artists could mint on their blockchain or on their network or whatever it is that you're minting on. So you always find somewhere that would fit into your expression. If you want to support women, there's and if you can't find, you can always create yours yourself. So there are always platforms that are supporting that expression. So all the artist has to do is search for them. And there are blockchains that wouldn't cost the environment, wouldn't affect the environment negatively. So the artists could look towards minting on those particular blockchains or side chains.
Dev, you had something that you wanted to chip in with.
Yeah, and I think Rebecca, pretty much covered what I was going to say too. But yeah, like, you have the option to essentially mint or upload an NFT anywhere you really want to, you know, like if you want to put it on the Ethereum blockchain, which is, you know, the most decentralized network that essentially people, you know, put their artwork on, then you can do that. And people present that, people think of that as like a canvas too. Like, where do I want my work to have the longest, you know, to have like the most longevity? But you also have the option to put it on, you know, another blockchain. And you know, a lot of people put their NFTs on a particular blockchain called Palm blockchain. And that one is essentially very popular because it's what they call interoperable with Ethereum. So that means that you can transfer your NFTs over. So we've seen artists such as Damien Hirst and also the International Gallery Pace Gallery build their NFTs on Palm. And that presents people an opportunity where they get an NFT that, you know, has no energy usage. It's the energy usage of a piece of toast, basically. And then, you know, if you do want to put, you know, transfer your NFT over to Ethereum, where it's a bigger ecosystem, you have the option to bridge that NFT over. So if you check out Damien Hirst's The Currency collection, that's pretty popular. People essentially have their NFTs on this Palm blockchain, and then they also exist on Ethereum as well. So people have bridged them over. So just having that you know, idea that the future won't just be one blockchain or you know, Ethereum, blah blah blah. It's just going to be a multi-chain world where, you know, the best blockchains are going to be ones that can essentially communicate with each other. So yeah, as long as you put it on one that you believe is safe, energy efficient too, and it's going to secure your work, then you should be good to go. And it's really all about the community that is going to invest in your work, not necessarily, you know, who's on what blockchain. So yeah.
Now we've got a lot of activity going on in the Q&A, so I'm going to switch over to picking up on some of the questions that have come up. One question that comes up quite a lot is whether the NFT craze is a bubble or is it here to stay? And I guess tied into that is the idea of, you know, the longevity of NFTs and whether they're going to there's something that they're going to endure, or whether they're just something that's just like a passing fad. Eric, would you like to pick up on this?
Sure. I think I foolishly predicted that the fuss would be over by now for NFTs in about March. I thought it was going to be a media bubble around it, and then activity would drop off. But because there is such a market, because there is so much money sloshing around, it's here to stay, right? As long as there is a culture supporting the perceived value of these assets, then the stuff's going to hang around. Technically, for a blockchain, it hangs around as long as anyone's using it. So I think Dev's point about Ethereum being kind of the one is, well, a lot more people are using it because it's like the original smart contract. There's lots of stuff going on Ethereum that's not going anywhere soon. Is it a bubble? I mean, it has all the signs of a bubble. You know, look at tulips and, you know, in the Netherlands. It has every sign of being a bubble. But as long as, you know, as Rebecca pointed out, as long as money is being pumped into the system, this bubble is going to keep growing. And at the moment, it's a growing bubble. So, you know, play as much as you like. But am I going to buy a CryptoPunk as an heirloom for my grandchildren? Not yet. You know what I mean? I'm not sure that if it's worth $1 million today, that it will be in 10 years' time.
Right.
Even if it exists on the blockchain, I'm just not sure culturally whether it will support that. But I could be completely wrong, and I'm sure Dev would disagree.
Just a very quick question that came up, but I think it's probably a good one to answer is, does one wallet represent one individual, or could it be that an individual has a number of wallets, or could it be a consortium? Rebecca, do you have an answer to that?
One individual can have multiple wallets. I can't count the number of wallets.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that for each wallet it's going to be one person. It could be a number of somebody trading under a number of aliases.
I mean, part of the inherent nature of the crypto space is anonymity, right? That's why it's beloved by the libertarians. So you can create wallets and no one knows who they are. And one of the cynical views of NFTs is that, you know, you can mint your NFT for $10. You can get another wallet to buy it for 10 million and then sell it onto a third wallet. You've just cleaned yourself $10 million. right? In terms of a transaction, you can have an internal transaction between wallets that looks like loads of money is moving between individuals, but it could be the same person just cleaning a bunch of money. So I mean, I think you need to be aware that crypto is wild west of regulation, and there's quite a lot of dodgy stuff going on there as well.
Dev, somebody's asked whether there are any digital spaces that perform the function of galleries or museums for LFTs. Would you field this one for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it falls in with what Eric was just saying too. You can have multiple wallets. One person can have 3 or 4 wallets with no name on them. But what people are essentially doing now are that they are creating groups based around a group wallet. And, they might essentially put funds in this group wallet. And then from there, they're creating, programs and code that can pretty much create what they call like a decentralized organization, where they can essentially, have certain periods of time where it disperses money to certain people. You can essentially run a company without like the traditional executives and, chief operating officer, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, you can essentially create your own digital organization, and it has a lot of autonomous, properties to it. So, in regards to answering, your question about museums and galleries creating, NFT marketplaces, we've seen a lot of ones pop up. Of course, like some people consider our group Felt Zine a gallery in some instances. So, we have our own essential virtual galleries, and we've done them with a lot of NFT marketplaces. So I'll put in the link, but this one is essentially called Principia Discordia. It's a virtual, it was made with a pretty much like a toolkit, but anyone can access it from their browser and essentially walk through a virtual world and see the artworks that we have within this curated exhibition. But in terms of, traditional museums and whatnot, I know Pace Gallery is creating their own NFT marketplace. So you'll see, new artists, but also, legendary artists like Lucas Samaras and, artists like Damien Hirst, who's part of Henny, creating NFTs. And, the average user or anybody in the world has the option to just go to the website and collect the work. So,
but then there are also obviously big platforms that people are buying NFTs through. I mean, if we're answering this question for somebody that's got no involvement in this market, yes, there are big platforms like, I guess, Nifty Gateway, like, where do you there are like, there are major kind of entities where you can go. And I think, Eric, we were talking about actually how, although there's a lot of discussion of this being a very kind of open and free market, actually, to an extent, it is important to have some kind of gatekeeper as well. I think you were discussing this last time.
Well, yeah, I think so. Just because artistically, if you open the door and say, everyone put your pictures in my gallery, you're going to end up with a gallery full of crap, right? I mean, it's just inherent, right? Because the quality, without any quality control, because the tools exist to mint, people mint all sorts of terrible things. So you, by association, if you're on a blockchain where it's full of rubbish, then much as if you're in a gallery full of terrible paintings, it wouldn't look good for you. So there are these platforms where you kind of have to, provide evidence of your artistic worth before there'll be a listing. I think Super Rare works like that. I'm not sure about the others. Dev probably knows more than I. But in that, if you can prove your worth enough to these platforms, then you can get on it. And then by association, much like being accepted by a traditional gallery, by association, you're legitimized in the system. So there is a variation, like Rareable, anyone can mint on. Hick and Nunk, anyone can mint on. But others, there is this kind of curatorial layer. So probably knows more about which ones have curatorial layer.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, that's very interesting because, there are like particular marketplaces where you have to apply, you have to send a video. You have to
Foundation did that, I think. Was it Foundation?
Well, Super Rare does that, but Foundation has an interesting mechanism where they are sort of a creator. They have a creator invite system. So if you're on it, like let's say I'm on it, I can invite my friends if I sell a work. So I get, a certain amount of invites. So that's kind of very cool in a creator first, community first mechanism. But, I think with, NFTs in general, these marketplaces many of them are, like you're saying, successful because they are essentially becoming the credible curator in a world of just so many, digital assets that are just out there. So they're sort of becoming that voice to say, hey, you come to Super Rare, you're going to get premier art. But the other thing is that, it's also sort of a psyop where anyone can really be a curator. Anyone can, be a credible curator if they have, a community that listens to them. So, that's to say that, if someone really wants to, they can create their own, NFT marketplace, and it doesn't even have to, have a million people on it. It could just be, a marketplace with a few artists, and as long as there's a community of people that want to support that, that's the very interesting thing that you can also do. While there are these large marketplaces that you have to apply to get into, there are other people that are just going to make a group or a marketplace that's going to specifically speak to like a certain community or a small niche of people. So that's also like the super exciting thing to me. Like I've seen a lot of sort of groups just kind of create their own sort of, not even marketplace, but just a group of people that collect each other's work and they create value around themselves. So I hope to see like more of that, and maybe less marketplaces, but yeah.
That's really interesting. And that sounds like a really, I mean, I guess for any kind of art to have a kind of self-sustaining community like that's really interesting. I'm going to condense some of the questions that have come through because we've still got a few to get through, but there seem to be some themes emerging. There's a question really about whether this is a generational thing, which I think goes into who's buying it. Rebecca, would you like to talk a little bit about, specifically somebody says, does anyone over 40 buy NFTs? Do you see this as a particular kind of generational phenomenon?
Yes, NFTs will be for Gen Zs and millennials. But then we do have, of course, people like Eric are buying into it. So we can't just say it's Gen Zs and millennials.
Old people like me, yeah. Even oldies do it. I heard what you said there.
But then I think it's more who's online and what they are doing online. That's what matters, because we have and then accessibility to online information. We have, lots of Gen Zs and millennials who don't have access to the internet, so they can't buy into NFTs. We have lots of, Gen X or, the older generation who don't have access to the internet or do not want to have access to the internet, and they can't have access to this information. So it's more of majorly Gen Zs and millennials are interested in NFTs, in crypto, everything that has to do with the digital world. But then it also has to do with people who have access to this information. So it's like a two-way thing: access to information, then age gap. So we can't really say, but if we're looking at the age gap, then Gen Zs and millennials will take the top.
Mm-hmm. Now we've also got a question about the art world's attitude towards NFTs. I feel like maybe as the ambassador from the kind of what do we call it now? The fiat art world, the kind of the art world outside of NFTs. I might actually feel this one myself because yes, Louise has asked why do I think the artistic community seems to be quite reluctant and sometimes even hostile to the use of NFTs? I mean, I think part of that is what Eric touched on earlier, which is this idea that it's really unpleasant to think of art as an asset class alone. And I don't think there are many artists that would like to, would that feel comfortable with the idea that just making art as an asset class. I think possibly it touches on what Rebecca was talking about, that this is maybe a generational phenomenon, and that obviously maybe artists outside of that generation don't feel particularly comfortable in this arena. On the other hand, also, I think that there's this really interesting question about blockchain in the art world, which I think came up in the discussion with Dev and Eric earlier, which is that potentially there is an interesting application of blockchain with artworks that aren't, in quotes, what you think of as NFTs, to allow art to become traceable and to allow artists to be remunerated each time an artwork's sold. So I think there's potentially going to be a kind of hybrid evolution moving forward, possibly. I don't know, maybe I'm making this up, but there are, but I think it could become a very interesting way to keep track of artworks, to make sure that they're not being, that they've got good provenance, and also to make sure that artists continue to get paid each time they change hands. There are also some kind of real world art projects that have been doing a kind of hybrid model as well. I think Paradise Row in London at the moment has been having physical exhibitions, which are also available as an NFT, and they've been using that to ensure that not only the money goes to the artist, but it also goes to a charity of their choice as well each time the work changes hands. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of feeling that it's potentially a bubble, that it's art being treated as an asset class, and that it is a generational question as well. I think the final question that we've got here is to do with the ethics of NFTs. Is the problem not the environmental point of view, but the cloud accessibility and democracy issue? Do makers have any real agency in the market? I think Rebecca is talking about this perhaps right now. This is John was saying this.
I would say, you know, I as a practicing artist, I have no access to the white cube.
Right.
So in terms of accessibility, yeah, I don't have access to the fine art market in the same way. So I mean, there is a practical thing, who's got an internet connection or not, but I think that's a broader issue about you know, networking the world, and it's specifically about NFTs. And I say, particularly from an artistic perspective, you know, if NFTs disappeared, I would perfectly be happy selling paintings again, and I would feel slightly prouder of daubing a canvas and selling it to someone than playing this game. And that may well be a generational thing. But accessibility is an issue. I mean, not just in whether you have an internet connection, but whether you're willing to get your head around cryptocurrencies. It's like, it's a non-trivial business to get into this game. And I think that the arcane barrier to entry is part of what is producing this kind of visceral response, that people are either in it, the millennials and the Gen Zs love it, totally get it, fine. And then this kind of perhaps slightly older generation who are like, oh, this is crazy and arcane, and I don't want to go there. So it's perhaps cultural accessibility as much as kind of technical accessibility.
We are coming to the end of our session. I just wondered if literally anybody had kind of, in less than 10 words, a piece of advice for anybody thinking of getting into the NFT world, either as an artist or as a collector. Rebecca, do you have a kind of final piece of advice? Very, very brief, because I think we're going to have to finish up quickly.
Set your principles, then get into NFTs.
Dev?
You know, watch and learn and research and take your time. It's going to be here for a very long time, so no rush.
Yeah, I think research is key. And Eric?
It's an interesting game to play. As an artist, it's fascinating that there is now a market for digital artworks. I think that's, for me personally, the most interesting thing. As a collector, I don't know, go and buy whatever Dev is buying. You know what I mean? He knows way more about it than I do, so I'm not gonna comment on the market side of it.
Okay, fantastic. Dev, Eric, Rebecca, thank you so much. I think we've covered a lot of quite broad ground in that. That was a really fascinating conversation. And Ali, thank you so much for hosting us this evening. I don't know if you want to say farewell. Yes, thank you so much, Ali. And thank you everyone who joined us. And I hope we managed to answer your questions. I know I didn't answer exactly every single question, but I tried to broadly cover the questions that came up. I hope you've all enjoyed that, and farewell.